Hi, I'm Angus Stewart and I'm at Macquarie Point, a really exciting new development on the edge of the Hobart CBD in Tasmania. It's right next to the harbour and in the shadows of the iconic cenotaph. For over 100 years this area has been an industrial site. It was an old railhead for Hobart as well as a gateway to the port. So it's been an area that's not been available to the general public up until now. I'm standing amongst a brand new garden, which is part of what's going to be known as the Edible Precinct, a series of gardens across Macquarie Point that feature the useful plants across Tasmanian human history, both Aboriginal and European. For instance, we have the bower spinach, used for thousands of years by the local Aboriginal people around the Tasmanian coastline, which will sit side by side with exotic spinach, introduced by the early European settlers. Here we have the very familiar exotic strawberry, and growing next to it is a fascinating namesake, the creeping strawberry pine from the alpine country of Tasmania. This plant has fascinating bright red strawberry-like fruits through the warmer months that were used for thousands of years as a food source by the local Aboriginal population in the highlands. These plants are growing in specially constructed wicking beds inspired by apple picking bins used throughout the orchards of Tasmania. They have a reservoir of water in the base, and you can see the overflow outlet there, which means that these units are self-watering, and they're sat on top of an old concrete slab which was once the home of an old cool store warehouse, a nod to that industrial history of Tasmania. The Edible Precinct at Macquarie Point is not only a living, breathing example of an urban farm, but it's also a place where the general public can come and be educated about sustainable food production in the city. There'll be workshops on things like composting, propagation, as well as how to grow your own food. Come and get involved. We're now in a different part of Macquarie Point called Red Square. It's a thriving hub of commercial activity. We've got the Hobart Brewing Company creating all sorts of delicious beers from the aromatic plants growing behind me. There are food trucks coming and going all the time. There's even a mobile hair salon, and the waste hair is going back into our worm farms to produce organic fertiliser to feed this part of the Edible Precinct. The central principle of the Edible Precinct is that it is all about sustainable urban farming. Here we have a bank of worm farms and composting units which are designed to provide the fuel for all the gardens throughout the Edible Precinct. Organic wastes from the cafes, from the brewery, the hair from the hair salon, all go through these worm farms to create the fertiliser which is the fuel for growing the food. This particular worm farm has 3 tiers through which the worms can move up and down, and a tray at the bottom where liquid can collect. Once all the organic waste in the bottom bin has fully composted, it can be removed and the solid worm castings, in other words the worm manure, can be used as a solid fertiliser in the Edible Precinct. At the bottom there is a reservoir with a tap, and another way of utilising all the nutrients that are released is to pass water through all 3 of the top bins, and that collects down in the bottom reservoir. That liquid is then tapped off as a rich, really well balanced source of liquid organic fertiliser to grow food. So if we have a look in the middle bin, we can see a really active population of worms which are going to town on a whole lot of brewery waste. So when the population of worms diminishes, we actually have another bank of big 400 litre compost or Getty bins in which bulk organic waste is used to further build huge populations of worms to keep this sustainable ethos going throughout the Edible Precinct.